Tier 1. Jehovah's Witnesses. Have you ever wondered what happens to your soul when your heart stops beating, your brain shuts down, and your body goes cold? Well, for Jehovah's Witnesses, the answer is pretty simple. Your soul goes poof. It doesn't float off to heaven, hell, or some weird astral plane. It just stops working. Jehovah's Witnesses don't see the soul as some mystical, ghostly version of you. To them, it's more like a life force, kind of like a phone battery. When the battery dies, your body powers down, and that's it. They argue that the idea of an immortal soul is based on ancient Greek philosophy, not the teachings of Jesus or the Bible. So when you die, there's no eternity for your soul, just a hard stop. And speaking of hard stops, let's talk about hell for a second. Jehovah's Witnesses teach us that hell isn't a fiery pit filled with pitchfork-wielding demons, it's just nothingness. According to their teachings, the Sheol, or Hades, mentioned in the Bible is basically a universal graveyard for the dead. What's crazy is, even the good people end up here. Your grandma who always baked cookies for the neighborhood kids, she's there too. Lucky for you, there's a way out, a resurrection for the righteous. To Jehovah's Witnesses, death is like being saved to a supernatural USB drive, ready to be re-uploaded later. The lucky ones who lived righteous lives are resurrected to live forever. But for the non-believers and the unrepentant, death isn't just a layover before eternal torment. It's the end, literally. Now, let's talk about how resurrection works, or the people who do get resurrected. It happens in two phases. First, there's the anointed, an elite group of 144,000 disciples of Jesus who've already started their journey to heaven to rule alongside him. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus returned invisibly in 1914, and that this first resurrection is already underway. Next, we have the Great Cloud of Witnesses. This group includes pretty much everyone who isn't part of the anointed, except, of course, the non-believers and unrepentant. All who are part of the Great Cloud will be resurrected to live on a paradise-like version of Earth where there's no sickness, no death, and no pain. So, to sum it all up, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that death is like falling into the deepest sleep imaginable. No dreams, no awareness, nothing. And whether you wake up or not is dependent on what you believed in and the way you lived your life. Islam. So you've lived your life, made decisions, some good, some questionable, and now it's lights out. In Islam, the afterlife is a full-on process. Here's what you need to know. When the time comes, you will meet Azrael, the angel of death. He's like the ultimate HR rep for souls, sent by Allah, SWT, to clock you out of worldly life. 1 minute you're sipping tea or doom scrolling, and the next, your soul is on its way out. Azrael's visit would mark the end of your earthly life, which Muslims call dunya. Now it's time for some post-death rituals. Your family swings into action, starting with a full-body purification ritual. Then comes the funeral prayer, and finally, they lower you 6 feet under, alone. No phones, no snacks, just you, the dirt, and 2 big scary angels on their way. When the angels Munkar and Nakir arrive, the first thing you will realize is that they didn't drop by to make small talk. They've got 3 critical questions for you. Who is your Lord? Who is your prophet? And what is your faith? Answer confidently and you get to chill in peace until Judgment Day. Fail the test and, well, your grave will suddenly become more like a medieval torture dungeon than a resting place. Just like that, you've entered Barzakh, the limbo-like stage between worlds. If you lived the righteous life, you would get VIP treatment and all the good stuff. But if your track record wasn't great, let's just say you'll have a really hard time. Now you wait for the Day of Judgment. And here comes the surprise. No one knows when it'll happen. There are signs though. Things like the rise of the false messiah and the return of the prophet Isa, aka Jesus. When the day finally comes, there's a massive roll call. All of humanity is resurrected, and Allah, SWT, judges everyone based on their book of deeds. Everything you did is in there, even that one time you stole your sibling's fries. The next part is crossing the As-Sirat Bridge, which is more or less a tightrope stretched over the pit of hell. The righteous glide along effortlessly. But if you're on the naughty list, gravity isn't your friend, and you'll end up falling straight into the blazing fires of Jahannam. In Jahannam, you'll have to deal with scorching heat, boiling water, and endless regret. It's like being trapped in a nightmarish torture chamber with no escape. If you make it across the bridge, you will enter Jannah, the eternal paradise. Here you will have the time of your life surrounded by cool shades, flowing rivers, endless feasts, and eternal happiness. It's a party with the most divine guest list ever. That said, you should probably do your best to live a righteous life. You know, for obvious reasons. Greek mythology. When you died in ancient Greece, your soul was torn from your body and sent straight to the underworld to meet Hades, the king of the dead, who lived at the edges of the ocean beneath the Earth's deepest layers. Given Hades' reputation, it's no surprise that the underworld wasn't exactly a happy place. It was a sunless, endless expanse where only the dead lived. It was so bad that Achilles, one of Greek mythology's greatest warriors, admitted to Odysseus that he'd rather struggle as a humble servant among the living than rule as a king in the underworld. Yikes. Despite the sad state of the underworld, the ancient Greeks deeply respected the dead. Philosophers like Plato even suggested that the gods' greatest gift to the deceased was ensuring their memory lived on among the living. Before burial, the body of the deceased was carefully cleaned, clothed, and prepared. A coin was placed in their mouth or in their eyes as payment for Charon, the ferryman tasked with transporting souls across the Styx River. This payment was non-negotiable. Charon didn't work for free. No coin, no crossing. Those who couldn't pay were doomed to wander in limbo, stuck between the worlds of the living and the dead forever. In ancient Greece, funerals were a big thing. Families buried their loved ones with jewelry, pottery, coins, and just about every other item they thought the spirit might need in the afterlife. But it didn't stop there. Family members would return to the tombs each year to bring fresh offerings and redecorate. Was it out of love? Sure, but it was also out of fear. In those days, people believed that neglecting the dead could bring back curses or bad luck to the living. After burial, the soul journey to the afterlife would begin. Hermes, the god of travelers, would guide the ghosts to the underworld's entrance. From there, Charon would ferry them across the Styx, or the Acheron, aka the River of Hate and the River of Woe. Once inside, the wandering soul would quickly realize that the underworld was a large, divided realm. At the heart of it all was Hades, ruling alongside his queen, Persephone, with help from deities like Thanatos, the god of death, Hypnos, the god of sleep, Nyx, the goddess of night, and Hecate, the goddess of magic and witchcraft. The underworld was divided into different zones. Virtuous souls were sent to Elysium, a paradise of eternal peace. The wicked, alongside those who overindulged in earthly pleasures, were thrown into Tartarus, a pit of endless torment. And then there were the average souls, who just wandered, forgotten, aimless, and stuck in Hades' domain for all eternity. But not everyone accepted this fate. Take Orpheus, the legendary musician, for example. He used his enchanting music to sway even the gods, and when his bride Eurydice passed, he traveled to the underworld to rescue her. Persephone granted him permission to bring Eurydice back to the land of the living, but with one harsh condition. He couldn't turn around and look at her until they were both safely out of the underworld. Orpheus gave it his best shot, but doubt got the better of him. The moment he turned back, Eurydice vanished. Purgatory, Catholicism. Catholics aren't the only ones who believe in purgatory. A good number of other denominations do too, though their views on what it is and what happens there differs slightly. For the next few minutes though, we will be siding with the Catholics. The Catholic purgatory is an interesting concept to say the least. Congratulations, you're saved! But then you die and learn you're not ready for heaven just yet. Instead, you find yourself in purgatory, a cosmic waiting room where your soul gets purified. According to the church, even if your sins have been forgiven, your soul still needs to be purified from the lingering stains left by unhealthy attachments to the things of the flesh. The doctrine of purgatory is an important theme in Catholic theology because it comes up pretty often. While Catholics do believe in heaven and hell, the church teaches about something called venial sins. These are the smaller sins that don't cut you off from God entirely, but they come with temporal punishment that you'll have to deal with in purgatory if you don't sort things out here. Thankfully, you're not alone in this. The living can actually help speed things along for the souls stuck in purgatory. Catholics believe in something called the communion of saints, which basically means that the good energy from the living and the saints in heaven can help purify souls faster. Think of it like getting extra credit on a group project. I would play nice with my loved ones if I were you. Catholics think of time in purgatory as a necessary transformation, rather than punishment for punishment's sake. The theologian Joseph Ratzinger, who would go on to become Pope Benedict XVI, described it as a process where one becomes capable of God. If you think this all sounds abstract, you're probably right. But there's more. Some saints and mystics, like Saint Catherine of Genoa, describe purgatory as a place of profound longing. Souls there apparently want to undergo purification because they're so desperate to be with God. It's pain, but with a purpose. Rebirth. Buddhism. The first thing you should know about rebirth is that after you die, you might wake up as an animal or a ghost. Hold on, let me explain. The Buddhist afterlife isn't a straightforward heaven or hell situation. Instead, when you die, you get looped into an endless cycle of suffering, dissatisfaction, and pain. Your only ticket out is reaching a state called nirvana, where you no longer have cravings or wants, and so can no longer suffer. When you die, you don't just disappear. You just get reborn into one of 6 realms, and the criteria for where you go is karma. If you've been good, congratulations. You might find yourself in the human realm, or even chilling with the gods. But if you racked up bad karma in your lifetime, you could end up as a hungry ghost, or worse, in the hell realm. And that's not all. In some Buddhist traditions, for example, Tibetan Buddhism, there's some sort of middle zone between death and rebirth called Bardo. In Bardo, your consciousness is sort of suspended for up to 49 days, trying to figure out its next move. While a handful of Buddhist traditions accepted this belief, the others weren't buying it. Oh, and by the way, Bardo isn't the only thing the different Buddhist traditions can't seem to agree on. Each sect has a varying opinion on what's actually being reborn during the rebirth process. Some believe that it's your vijnana, or consciousness, that flows like a stream from life to life, while others argue that nothing physical or conscious carries over, only the consequences of your actions. Either way, next time you're tempted to skip a meditation session, you should think about this and maybe get in some good deeds before it's too late. Tier 2. Egyptian Beliefs. The Egyptians believed that in the afterlife, their spirits had to survive a dangerous underworld journey, face trial with 43 divine judges, and pass the ultimate heart-weighing test to earn a spot in paradise. Living Egyptians didn't wait until death to get ready for the afterlife. They knew it was going to be a bureaucratic nightmare and wanted to be prepared. First up, shopping. Funerary essentials like protective charms, doll-like statuettes called shabtis, and custom copies of the Book of the Dead were must-haves. If you were rolling in wealth, you could splurge on jewel-covered coffins and private tombs. Now, about those shabtis. They were creepy little figurines that came to life in the afterlife to do all your hard labor while you relaxed, possibly sipping paradise cocktails. When you die, your spirit would have to navigate a terrifying underworld filled with monstrous gatekeepers and mean gods. This is where having a Book of the Dead pays off. It's essentially a cheat sheet for passwords and spells to help you make it out in one piece. The goal is to reach Osiris, the god of the underworld, for your final judgment. But first, you had to plead your case. Now for the judgment part. Your heart, ever the telltale organ, would be weighed against the feather of Mot, the goddess of truth and justice. If your heart was heavier because of all the bad stuff you did, things wouldn't end well. Ammit, the devourer, would eat your heart, and your soul would be sent into eternal darkness. If the scales balanced, you'd head straight into paradise, also known as the Field of Rushes, a place of endless crops, sunny skies, and blue rivers, where you could farm for eternity, or let your trusty shabtis handle the hard work. Hinduism. In Hinduism, after you say your final goodbye to the world, you'll find yourself in the celestial courtroom of Yama, the god of death. And he won't be alone. Chitragupta, his trusty accountant, will be there with the ultimate receipt book, detailing every single deed you've done, good or bad. Oh, and Varuna, the universal spy master, will also be present, just to remind you that someone was watching you the whole time. At some point, they will whip out a mirror. Not just any mirror, but one that replays every cringe moment of your life. Remember that time you cut in line or ghosted someone? Yep, that's on replay. Based on this celestial performance review, you'll either be sent up to Svarga, Hindu heaven, for some R&R, or down to Naraka, Hindu hell, to be punished. Svarga isn't forever. It's more like an all-expense-paid vacation with an expiration date. You'll hang out with divine beings, enjoy heavenly pleasures, and basically live your best life until your good karma runs out. Naraka, on the other hand, is like an escape room from hell, literally. The punishments are custom-tailored to your sins, but lucky for you, it's not eternal. Once you've paid your dues, you're free to move on. When your stint in either place is up, it's reincarnation time. Your Atman, or consciousness, moves on to its next life. Depending on your karma, and even your final thoughts at the moment of death, you could come back as anything. A human, a god, an animal, or, if you're really unlucky, a hungry ghost known as a preta. That's right, whatever is on your mind at the moment of death could decide whether you're reborn as a prince or a pigeon. No pressure though, just chant those mantras like your afterlife depends on it, because it does. Speaking of hungry ghosts, let's dive into Preta territory. Pretas are unlikely souls trapped on Earth and cursed with an insatiable hunger and thirst. They are typically the souls of people who were corrupt, compulsive, deceitful, jealous, or greedy while alive. They're often depicted as human-like figures with sunken skin, long, thin necks, and big bellies. Get it? Because they're always hungry? So maybe that one fell flat. Pretas can only be freed through specific rituals, which often involve offerings, prayers, and priests chanting ancient verses. But that's a whole different story. If at any point you're tired of the whole reincarnation loop, there's one ultimate goal: moksha. Think of it as cosmic retirement. No more birth, no more death, no more drama. Instead, your Atman merges with Brahman, the ultimate reality, and you exist in eternal, blissful liberation. Mormonism. The Mormon afterlife is like someone took the concept of heaven and hell and decided to make it a lot more complex, with a bunch of different levels, sort of like a tiered subscription plan. Step 1, you die. After that, your spirit makes a pit stop in one of two places. If you lived a decent life, you would be sent to spirit paradise, where you can chill, relax, and wait for the second coming of Christ. But if you weren't so great, welcome to spirit prison. The good news is that it's not exactly a fiery dungeon. The bad news, guilt, regret, and spiritual FOMO are the main attractions. Oh, and no matter where you end up, everyone's bummed out because they're stuck without their bodies, which apparently is a big deal. Fast forward to Judgment Day when God decides your eternal fate. The Mormon afterlife has 3 kingdoms of glory, ranked from gold membership to, at least you made it in. The Celestial Kingdom is the top tier package. It's more or less the VIP lounge of the afterlife. Only devout, baptized Mormons who checked all the boxes, including eternal temple marriage, get in here. And yes, it's divided into 3 sublevels, because apparently even the elite need a hierarchy. The top tier folks get to hang out full time with God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost. Not much is said about what the people in the lower celestial tiers are up to, but hey, they're still doing better than everyone else. The middle tier is called the Terrestrial Kingdom, and it's reserved for honorable people who were blinded by the craftiness of men while on Earth. You can think of them as good people who didn't quite make the cut. They get occasional hangouts with Jesus, but God the Father is off limits. The last level is the Telestial Kingdom, aka the Afterlife Probation Zone. This is where the unrepentant sinners and those who couldn't get their act together end up. There's no God here, no Jesus either, just the Holy Ghost dropping by occasionally to keep things running. Before you settle into this kingdom, you have to suffer for your sins first, so yay? At Christ's second coming, people destined for the celestial and terrestrial realms will be resurrected to live on Earth under Jesus' personal rule for 1,000 years. Sadly, those headed for the Telestial Kingdom have to wait it out. They remain stuck in limbo without their physical bodies. If you really messed up while on Earth, there's one last destination: the outer darkness. This is the no-hope zone for people who knew Christ was legit, but still said, nah, I'm good. It's actually a lot more complex than that, but we are sticking with the basics. The outer darkness is often referred to as Mormon hell. Eternal despair, no gods, and definitely no upgrades. Yep, definitely hell. Shinto. Shintoism, or the way of the gods, is one of Japan's oldest belief systems. And when it comes to the afterlife, it's got some really fascinating theories. When a Shinto believer dies, their kami, which is basically their spiritual energy or essence, breaks free from the body and heads off to one of a few destinations. First up, there's Takamanohara, essentially Shinto heaven, where the VIP deities kick back. Then there's Yomi, the underworld, which is about as welcoming as a moldy basement. Dark, damp, and generally unpleasant. Lastly, there's Tokoyo, a mysterious place just beyond the sea. Unlike the others, Tokoyo isn't all that flashy or grim. In Shintoism, your kami doesn't get to clock out and relax just because you're dead. It still needs food, drink, and maybe even some entertainment to keep things going. Through rituals and prayers, families honor their ancestors, and in return, the kami keeps an eye on them. But fair warning, you've got to keep up those offerings, or you might end up with a moody ghost situation. Dying in Shinto isn't a simple lights-out deal. For a smooth transition, you've got to leave the world with no grudges, regrets, or unresolved drama. Forget about that friend who owes you money. If you hold on to it, you might end up haunting them or something just as crazy. Now, because Japan has a knack for blending traditions, Buddhism brought its own ideas to the party. Cremation became the standard, and concepts like Jodo, or Pure Land, and Jigoku, a fiery, icy hell, joined the mix. Fun fact, Jigoku isn't just a spooky metaphor. There are actual places in Japan, like Beppu and Mount Osore, where bubbling hot springs and sulfur clouds are said to mark the entrances to this hellish underworld. Imagine dying and finding out your portal to the afterlife is in a literal volcanic hotspot. Yikes. One of the most beautiful traditions tied to the Shinto afterlife is Obon, a summer festival where the spirits of ancestors are invited back for a visit. During this time, families go all out, cleaning graves, offering food and flowers, and lighting up colorful lanterns to guide the spirits home. There's even the Bon Odori dance, which is more or less a cheerful ghost reunion. If you've got good kami vibes and a diligent family, the afterlife might not be so bad after all. Sikhism. Imagine a life where every decision you make determines if your soul takes a step closer to freedom or tumbles down into another lifetime, as, say, a goat. That's the Sikh perspective on the afterlife. In Sikhism, humans are not the only creatures with souls. All living beings have them, including animals. The soul is a divine spark, a gift from God, who they refer to as Waheguru, and it goes through something called the cycle of samsara. If you screw things up during your lifetime, you risk cycling through 8.4 million life forms in an endless cycle of reincarnation. Now that's a lot of costume changes. But that's not all. The body your soul gets assigned to in its next life isn't random. Much like the Buddhist afterlife, your fate will be determined by karma. To put it simply, every action, word, and even your thoughts leave a mark on your karmic scorecard. Rack up enough good karma and you might land a human body. But if you screw things up, well, I hope you enjoy being a cockroach. Humans hold a special place in Sikhism because we have the unique ability to break free from samsara, aka the seemingly endless reincarnation cycle. This liberation is the ultimate goal, and it's achieved when the soul merges with Waheguru and returns to the source of all creation. No more lifetimes, no more suffering, just eternal peace. But how do you get there? Sikhs believe that being liberated is dependent on the grace of Waheguru, but good deeds are also important. That part is actually pretty straightforward. First, there's Kirat Karna, which means you have to earn an honest living. No stealing, cheating, or pyramid schemes. Next, there's Wanchakna. This one's all about sharing what you have with others, so think communal meals, and you'll probably get brownie points for not hoarding snacks. Another thing you have to do is meditate on God's name. In Sikhism, this practice is called Nam Japna, and it roughly translates to remembrance of God. There are a lot more rules, but I'm sure you get the idea. For Sikhs, death isn't an end. It's a checkpoint. The body is merely a vessel for the soul, which moves on to its next destination based on the karma it's accumulated. The idea of being stuck in an eternal loop of existence can be unsettling, but it's also deeply hopeful, because no matter how many lifetimes it takes, the soul is always moving towards liberation. Tier 3. Judaism. Unlike many of the belief systems we have explored so far, Judaism doesn't give us a crystal clear roadmap to the afterlife. For starters, it focuses heavily on this world and prioritizes things like good deeds, helping others, and making this earthly life count. It's not that Jews don't care about what happens after we die, it's just that they're too busy living their best lives to stress over it. That said, here's what we know about the world to come, which to many Jews is the afterlife. It's a perfected version of existence, where life is full of sunshine, rainbows, and eternal bliss. But it only arrives after the Messiah makes a grand entrance, judgment is passed, and the righteous are ushered into their happily ever after. The problem is, no one's sure when that's going to happen. Now, let's talk about destinations. First up, we have Gan Eden, the Jewish idea of heaven. Gan Eden isn't your usual cloud surfing, harp playing setup. Instead, it is described by some as a state of pure closeness to God, where souls bask in divine light. Some others imagine Gan Eden as a restored Garden of Eden, where everyone sits around a giant table eating in peace. But before you get your ticket to Gan Eden, there's a pit stop to consider: Sheol. This is less hell and more of a waiting room. But instead of a boring room with old magazines and terrible elevator music, it's a shadowy, soul-cleansing pit. Some souls are sent here to be cleansed and purified before moving on. And then there's Gehinnom, which, well, let's just say you don't want to end up there. It's a place for torment and punishment, reserved for those who've really messed up. Murderers, traitors, people who wear skinny jeans. The good news is, in Judaism, this torment isn't eternal. Most souls get a time limit before they move on. Unless, of course, they were the worst of the worst. Now, it wouldn't be Judaism without a good resurrection plot twist, would it? Many Orthodox Jews believed that when the Messiah shows up, the dead will literally rise again. Because of this belief, traditional Jewish burial customs strictly forbid cremation. You have got to keep the body intact for its big comeback. Aztecs. In Aztec mythology, violent deaths seem to be the golden ticket to the best afterlives. If you died in battle or were sacrificed, congratulations, you hit the Aztec afterlife jackpot. Warriors who died in combat or on the altar went on to an eastern paradise where they helped lift the sun every morning. And after a few years, they transformed into hummingbirds and butterflies. Women who died in childbirth were considered warriors too, and ended up in a similar paradise, but in the West. Their job was to help lower the sun at the end of the day. Merchants who lost their lives while embarking on dangerous trips were considered VIPs in the Aztec afterlife. There was a special place reserved for them somewhere in the 13 layers of Aztec heaven. People who drowned or were struck by lightning also made the cut. They were believed to be handpicked by the rain god, Tlaloc, to chill in his lush, flower-filled paradise. Before you start wishing you were among the Aztecs, you should know that the afterlife wasn't like that for everyone. In fact, most people didn't get anything that fancy. Regular folks got the short end of the afterlife stick. If you died an ordinary death, like say from illness or old age, you were sent on a 4-year journey to Mictlan, the land of the dead. And trust me, it wasn't a fun trip. Mictlan was a dark, windowless underworld, far from the peaceful paradises warriors and mothers got to enjoy. The journey there was filled with terrifying trials because apparently nothing was easy when it came to ancient civilizations and the afterlife. First, you had to pass through 9 levels of obstacles, each more horrifying than the last. There were paths swarming with snakes, winds sharp enough to slice your skin, demons eager to eat your heart, and mountains smashing together to crush you as you passed. At one point, you'd face a river of blood filled with jaguars ready to attack. Luckily, you weren't completely on your own. The Aztecs believed a spirit dog named Xolotl guided souls through the underworld. This trusty canine would help you cross rivers and survive other dangers. Without your dog, you were as good as stuck. After 4 years of enduring these horrors, you'd finally reach the 9th and final level of Mictlan. There, you'd meet Mictlan Tecutli, the Lord of Death, and his equally terrifying wife, Mictica Cihuatl. Mictlan Tecutli is often described as a partially decayed skeleton with a necklace of human eyeballs, claws for hands, and a hunger for human flesh. Pretty nice guy. He was often accompanied by bats, scorpions, and spiders, or whatever other creepy animals he felt like hanging out with that day. Limbo, Catholicism. This one's actually pretty grim. According to Catholic theology, limbo is an in-between place where the souls of unbaptized babies and anyone else who only has original sin might go after they die. But fun fact, the church has never made it official. So, ironically, limbo itself is in limbo. The idea of limbo started gaining traction through theological debates in the Middle Ages. It was an attempt to address a tough question. What happens to the soul of infants who die without baptism? Theologians proposed limbo as a state where these souls wouldn't suffer physical torments. No hellfire here, but would be forever deprived of the vision of God, or poena damni. In 1439, the Council of Florence affirmed that those who die in a state of original sin do not experience the same torments as those in mortal sin. However, it didn't explicitly name or define limbo. Over time, the concept gained enough acceptance among theologians and became a common, though unofficial, part of Catholic belief. By the 18th century, Pope Pius VI defended limbo against critics who dismissed it as an Pelagian fairy tale. In his 1794 document, Auctorem Fidei, he didn't define limbo as a doctrine, but stated it wasn't heretical to believe in it. Think of limbo as a Catholic headcanon, widely accepted for centuries but never officially required. In 2007, things took a turn when Pope Benedict XVI approved a document called The Hope of Salvation for Infants Who Die Without Being Baptized. The textbook limbo from common doctrine to a meh, maybe. The church has since then shifted its focus to God's mercy, suggesting that unbaptized babies might still be saved through mysterious divine ways. So is limbo canceled? Not entirely. The Catholic Church doesn't require belief in it anymore, but it hasn't officially tossed it out either. These days, the focus is more on hope over fear. Slavic Paganism. In the Slavic afterlife, the first thing you need to know is that you're on your own. The second thing is that you may not make it out alive. even though technically you're already dead. Let's break it down, shall we? The Slavs believed in 3 realms. First up, there's Pravia, the realm of the gods. It's paradise, but only for the select few who lived righteously enough to impress the divine beings. Next is Jawia, the realm of the living. The Slavic thought of it as a transitional space where the living try to prepare their souls for the challenges ahead. And then there's Nawia, sometimes called Nav, the realm of the dead. It's dark, subterranean, and crawling with creepy spirits, demons, and otherworldly creatures. Dying, as it turns out, is just the beginning. Your adventure into the afterlife will kick off with a dangerous journey across the river Smorodina, the Slavic equivalent of the river Styx. Except, unlike Styx, there's no cute little boat to get you across. Nope, you're on your own. The only way across is the Kalinov Bridge, which doesn't sound so bad until you realize it's a flaming, rickety death trap. Oh, and it's guarded by Chudo Yudo, a terrifying beast with fiery eyes, who's just itching to make your life or death, depending on how you look at it, miserable. To cross, you'll have to endure scorching flames, a river that smells like a compost bin gone rogue, and Chudo Yudo's relentless tests. If you manage to survive that, big if, things don't get easier. Waiting for you on the other side is Baba Yaga, the infamous witch of Slavic folklore. You've probably heard of her, but in case you haven't, I'll paint you a picture. Baba Yaga is a terrifying old witch who lives in a hut made of bones perched on giant chicken legs, deep in an evil forest. Yes, her house stands on chicken legs. Let's keep it moving. Baba Yaga is basically the Slavic version of a gatekeeper, but she's a lot scarier. To pass her tests, you'll need to perform impossible tasks, like gathering fire from her furnace without getting roasted, or solving riddles that would make a sphinx cry. If you fail, well, let's just say it doesn't end well. Baba Yaga also tests the living, offering cryptic wisdom, or, doom. You'll want to be on her good side, if that's even possible. If you thought Baba Yaga was bad, let me introduce you to Koshchei the Immortal, who just happens to be the ruler of Nawia. He's a skeletal figure who really enjoys being alive and immortal. So much so that his life force is said to be hidden in a magical needle inside an egg, which is inside a duck, which is inside a rabbit, which is inside something else, or something like that. You're probably scared shitless at this point, but there's some good news. You won't stay in Nawia forever. Souls eventually reincarnate, returning to Jawia as humans or animals, depending on how righteous or terrible you were in a past life. But there's a catch. You keep faint memories of your past lives. So if you had a particularly rough time in Nawia, you might be haunted by weird flashbacks. In short, the Slavic afterlife is not for the faint of heart. Between flaming bridges, creepy witches, and skeletal overlords, it's a wonder anyone makes it through. But hey, at least reincarnation gives you a second shot. Just maybe don't mess it up this time. Mayans, Xibalba. The Mayan afterlife was honestly the stuff of nightmares. To put it simply, the ancient Mayans didn't picture the afterlife as a peaceful paradise for the souls of the dead. To them, death marked the beginning of a horrible journey into a realm so terrifying, they sometimes called it the place of fear. Only Mayans who survived this journey would A, make it to paradise, or B, be reincarnated. No one's really sure how it was supposed to work, but what we do know is that the souls who failed were doomed to spend all eternity wandering through the afterlife. The first thing a dead Mayan sees is a rocky, dangerous road. To the left is a river of blood that resembles something out of a horror movie. To the right, there's another river, but this one's full of scorpions with venomous stingers. How exciting. For the Mayans, Xibalba wasn't just a spooky concept. It was actually very real. Caves and cenotes in places like Coban, Guatemala, and Belize were thought to be literal gateways to the underworld. In Mayan history, Xibalba is described as a city filled with dark caves, winding tunnels, and spooky chambers, all organized into 9 levels, each more scary than the last. So who's in charge of this hellish domain? That would be the 12 Lords of Xibalba. At the top of the hierarchy were Hun Kame, aka One Death, and Vakub Kame, aka Seven Death. These two were tyrants who got their kick out of devising different means to torture the unfortunate souls who stumbled into their realm. The other 10 lords were assigned specific tasks, things like spreading disease, causing starvation, or plotting grotesque deaths. When they weren't busy wrecking lives, they oversaw Xibalba's most infamous attractions, the Houses of Terror. First up, there's Dark House, where total pitch-black darkness messes with your mind until paranoia sets in. Then comes Cold House, where frost and hail rattle your bones. Next is Jaguar House, where, you guessed it, there were hungry jaguars on the prowl. If you somehow survived that, you'd face Bat House, that was of course teeming with screeching, bloodthirsty bats. Or Razor House, where sentient blades sliced through the air, looking for flesh to shred. Finally, there was Hot House, a blazing furnace so intense, it would probably make the devil break a sweat. The next time you're having a bad day, just remember that things could be a lot worse. You could be a Mayan trying to make it through Xibalba. Wicca. Wiccans call their version of the afterlife the Summerland. It's a place where spirits can take a breather, rest, and reflect after enduring a lifetime of heartbreaks, unending bills, bad decisions, and that one regrettable haircut. So maybe I am projecting just a little. What sets Summerland apart from all the other afterlife theories is how chill it is about your earthly screw-ups. Unlike the heaven or hell theories where every wrong step brings you closer to eternal torment, Wiccans believe in introspection over judgment. You, yes you, review your life, figure out what went right, what went hilariously wrong, and then prep for the next round of existence. It's like a performance review, but you're the boss, the employee, and the HR team. Now let's talk aesthetics. Summerland isn't just peaceful. It's said to be a nature lover's paradise with meadows that go on forever, lush green forests, and clean rivers. As an added bonus, animals and spirits live in harmony there. So if you lost a pet during your lifetime, there's a good chance you'll find them waiting for you in Summerland, probably judging you less for all the missed mealtimes now that you're dead. Sadly, Summerland is only temporary. You can think of it as a quick resort stop before reincarnation. Once you've soaked in the peaceful atmosphere and gotten your spiritual glow up, it's time to head back down to Earth for round 2, or 20, because for Wiccans, life is a never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Interestingly, this isn't just a Wiccan thing. The roots of Summerland stretch back to ancient Celtic beliefs, where the afterlife was about renewal, not punishment. They called it Magmel, which roughly translates to the plane of joy. Wiccans adopted this idea, tweaking it a little to fit their spiritual ethos. As you may have guessed already, Wiccans are big on nature, so it's no surprise that their funerals reflects this. They're known for their eco-friendly burials focused on returning the body to the earth and giving thanks for hosting their spirit. Cremation is fine too, as long as the ashes find a home in nature, whether it's a forest, a beach, or the roots of a favorite tree. Tier 4. Celtic Beliefs. The Celtic afterlife, known as the Otherworld or Tir na Nog, is exactly the fairy tale paradise everyone hopes to end up in when they die. But it's not all rainbows and sunshine. I mean, it is, but there's a catch. We'll get to that soon. For now, let's start at the beginning. How exactly does one get to Tir na Nog? The Celts believed the Otherworld wasn't up or down like the heaven or hell model we're used to. Instead, it was right there, just beyond the veil of reality. Some even believed you could access it through caves, ancient burial mounds, misty waters, or by crossing the Western Sea. Even though it was so close, you couldn't just decide to pop in for a visit. To do that, you would require the guidance of a psychopomp, a supernatural guide who would make sure you didn't get lost, because mystical landscapes can get tricky. There were a few ways to score entry into Tir na Nog. For one, heroes, kings, or anyone brave or reckless enough to complete a legendary quest might find themselves here. Rituals and ceremonies were another option. And for the Celts, reincarnation was also on the table. Once you got there though, the Otherworld was like stepping into an Instagram filter. Endless green fields, sparkling rivers, and food so good it could trap you there for eternity. And it did just that. If you ate anything in Tir na Nog, there was no going back. One of the most famous tales about the Otherworld involves Oisin, a warrior who fell head over heels for Niam, a princess from Tir na Nog. She showed up on a magical white horse because, of course she did, and whisked him away to the land of eternal youth. For what felt like 3 years, Oisin lived it up in the Otherworld. But when he finally returned to Ireland, centuries had passed. His people were gone, and the world he knew was ancient history. The moral of the story? Tir na Nog might be paradise. When you are there, everything is not as it seems. Pantheism. In the words of the famous Keanu Reeves, we're all stardust, baby. No, seriously, that pretty much sums up the pantheistic view of the afterlife. Pantheists believe that the universe isn't just created by God, it is God. To them, everything is part of a divine unity. And when you die, you don't travel to some mystical realm. Instead, you rejoin the universe in the most literal way possible. Let's break it down. Imagine your body as a temporary vessel for energy. That energy, it doesn't go to some celestial waiting room when you die. Instead, it transforms. Your atoms disperse, becoming the soil for new life, the air that someone else breathes. And if you're lucky, maybe a tiny piece of stardust floating in space. The downside, though, is that your personal consciousness doesn't linger on, meaning you won't get the chance to come clean to grandma about breaking her favorite china set when you reunite in the great beyond. The pantheist afterlife is more like a cosmic recycling program where your essence becomes part of something far bigger than you could ever imagine. And here's where it gets tricky. Pantheism doesn't involve a personal god. No white-bearded man in the sky, no pearly gates, and there's certainly no fire pit. It's about the divine being present in everything. The blade of grass you stepped on? Sacred. The Milky Way you gazed at last night? Also sacred. The annoying Karen next door? Yep, she's divine too. The pantheistic belief system and its afterlife theory dates back thousands of years. In fact, ancient philosophies and religions have hinted at it, from the Upanishads of Hinduism to certain interpretations of Taoism. The modern term, though, was coined by a mathematician named Joseph Raphson in 1697. If you accept this theory, who knows? Maybe one day, a part of you will end up as a supernova, lighting up the cosmos. Taoism. When a person dies in Taoism, it's called shijie, which roughly translates to release from the corpse. So what happens next? Well, that depends on who you ask. You might ascend to heaven like the legendary Yellow Emperor, who casually floated away in broad daylight. Or you might go the more dramatic route, like the Taoist wonder worker Ye Fa Shan, who reportedly turned into a sword, then into a cloud of smoke, before drifting to heaven. You have to admit that's quite the exit strategy. Taoism teaches that your body is packed with spirits and monsters that act like a spiritual immune system, fending off illness and decay. When they leave, your body's defenses crumble, and well, game over. But for Taoists, this isn't a tragedy. It's just part of the natural cycle of life. Of course, some overachievers try to cheat the system by aiming for immortality, but more on that later. When it's time to say goodbye, Taoist funeral ceremonies are anything but basic. There's a sacred lamp on an altar, flanked by 2 towering candles. The lamp represents wisdom, or depending on who you ask, the elixir of immortality. The candle symbolizes the light of the sun, moon, and your own 2 eyes. In front of the lamp are cups of tea, rice, and water, representing yin, yang, and their perfect balance. And let's not forget the 5 plates of fruit, meticulously arranged to represent the elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. This setup isn't just for aesthetics though. Every detail has a purpose. Burning incense purifies the soul, and even the number of days the vigil lasts, usually an odd number like 3, 5, or 7, holds ritual significance. Think of it as feng shui for the afterlife. Now on to the big I word, immortality. For many Taoists, the goal isn't just reaching the afterlife. As the saying goes, why settle for being a ghost when you could live forever? Okay, so maybe no one says that. The point is, achieving immortality is the ultimate Taoist flex. But as you might expect, it's not an easy fit. To pull it off, you have to meet certain strict requirements and complete various tasks. There are 2 main paths to immortality: internal alchemy and external alchemy. External alchemy involves mastering breathing techniques, yoga, and developing medical skills. It's a whole thing. Mandaeism. You'll need some context for this one. The Mandaeans are an ancient ethno-religious community whose roots stretch back to Mesopotamia. Their religion is centered around prophets like Adam and John the Baptist. There are a bunch of others, but John is the star of the show. Now that you're up to speed, let's talk about the afterlife. The Mandaeans believe in 2 opposing realms: the world of light and the world of darkness, the ultimate forces of good and evil. On one side, you have the Alma di Nura, the heavenly light world, ruled by the supreme deity Hammurabi, who is sometimes called the Great Life. This god is said to be so vast and incomprehensible that I'm not even going to try to describe him. Surrounding Hammurabi are countless celestial beings called Uthras, who spend their eternal existence singing praises. On the other side is the world of darkness, a realm of chaos born from dark waters. A monstrous dragon named guards the gates, while Ruha, an evil queen, runs the show. Together, they've spawned demonic offspring who control the planets and zodiac constellations. Yeah, the stars you're wishing on, not as innocent as you thought they were. The material world is seen as a mashup of light and dark. Humans are basically walking contradictions. Our bodies, crafted by dark forces, are destined to rot, but our souls are tiny fragments of light, desperately trying to escape. And that's where the baptism comes in. Unlike other religions where one baptism seals the deal, Mandaeans believe in multiple baptisms throughout life to keep scrubbing away the darkness. Water isn't just important, it's sacred, the express lane to the light world. But no matter how many times you get baptized, salvation still isn't guaranteed. When you die, your soul embarks on a dangerous journey through layers of darkness. It's like a cosmic obstacle course, complete with demons and creepy dark waters. If you pass, congrats! You ascend to Alma Denura and get to bask in eternal light. But if the darkness wins, well, let's just say you'll be stuck in the bad part of the universe forever. Baha'i. The Baha'i perspective on the afterlife is either incredibly comforting or a little too intense, depending on how you feel about eternal journeys. In Baha'is teachings, life starts at conception, not just biologically, but spiritually. The moment you're conceived, your soul clocks in, ready to work. When death comes around, it's not the end, it's just the next chapter. To understand this, imagine your body as a cage and your soul as a bird. When the cage breaks, the bird isn't destroyed. It actually soars, happier, sharper, and freer than ever. Still talking about your soul, by the way. After death, your soul is believed to go on a journey toward perfection. The goal is to leave behind physical limitations and strive to reach the highest form of spiritual existence. So what does this look like? Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, describes it as a dimension so different from our world that comparing the two is like comparing a baby in the womb to an adult in the real world. To put it simply, it's beyond your wildest imagination. Here's the catch though, because of course there's always one. How you live now sets the stage for what comes next. Life on Earth is like a spiritual boot camp where you build the skills you'll need in the afterlife. Good deeds, kindness, and selflessness, that's your workout routine. And even after you're gone, prayers from your loved ones can give your soul a little extra boost. Baha'u'llah calls death a messenger of joy, something that's just there to take your soul to a better place. Tier 5. Aboriginal Australian Beliefs. With so many tribes, languages, and traditions, it's no surprise that the Aboriginal people of Australia don't have a one-size-fits-all afterlife theory. Still, many Aboriginal cultures share the idea of a land of the dead, an otherworldly place where spirits go after leaving the physical world. In this case, though, your entry into the land of the dead has nothing to do with how good or bad you were in your lifetime. There's no divine scale weighing your deeds or misdeeds. What really matters is the proper performance of funerary rites. When someone dies, their community gathers to guide their spirit on its journey. They offer an elaborate combination of prayers, sacred songs, medicines, and rituals to clear the way for the spirit to leave the body and find its place in the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Without these ceremonies, spirits may become restless and unable to move on. A key part of Aboriginal spirituality is the dreaming, a sacred, timeless realm where the past, present, and future all exist at once. It's the source of creation stories, and it connects spirits, ancestors, and the land itself. The dreaming explains not just the origins of life, but also what happens after death. It's believed that once spirits are properly sent off, they return to the dreaming, where they can be reborn as a person, an animal, a tree, or even a rock. But here's the problem. Spirits that aren't properly sent off can get stuck. When that happens, these unlucky spirits have no choice but to wander the land and bother the living. Because, let's be honest, what else is there to do? The fear of loved ones facing this fate has deeply influenced many Aboriginal customs surrounding death. Some tribes even avoid saying the name of the deceased to avoid, accidentally calling their spirit back. Aboriginal people also believe that the land itself is alive with spirits. When someone dies, their body is returned to Mother Earth, often with possessions like tools or ornaments. In some areas, the dead are buried, and in others, their remains might be placed in caves or even wrapped in special shrouds. It's a whole thing. Zoroastrianism. In Zoroastrianism, your soul doesn't immediately check out of the physical realm when you die. Instead, it lingers around for 3 days, like a house guest that doesn't know when to leave. During this time, your spirit will either be chilling or agonizing, depending on your life choices near your body. If you were a good person, your soul would be feeling pretty smug, reciting joyful chants from the Ustavaiti Gathas at the head of your body. But if you were one of the wicked ones, you would find yourself stuck wailing at the feet of your corpse, reciting the yasna in despair. After your 3-day earthbound vacation, you would be greeted by a visitor. If you lived a life of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, the Zoroastrian trifecta, a beautiful maiden would appear to guide you. She's basically the personification of all your goodness, and honestly, she sounds like a great time. If you were the opposite of a good person while on Earth, it shouldn't surprise you that your greeter is a horrid, naked hag ready to drag you to the next stage. Next up is crossing the Chinvat Bridge, Zoroastrianism's version of Final Judgment. At the bridge, you'll face Roshnu, a divine being with a set of scales that will determine your fate. Alongside Roshnu are other divine judges, who come together to hold the most stressful panel interview ever. If your good deeds outweigh the bad, congratulations! The bridge widens, and you get to walk across to paradise, probably fist-bumping Roshnu as you go. But if your bad deeds tip the scale, the bridge becomes razor thin. And who's waiting to greet you? The same ugly hag from before. Only this time, she's there to pull you into the horrors of hell. But wait, there's a third option. If your deeds are perfectly balanced, you will be sent to Misvan Gatu, the place of the mixed ones. It's not heaven, but it's not hell either. It's just a gray, meh existence with no joy, but also no real suffering. It's like Purgatory's blander cousin. After crossing the Chinvat Bridge, your soul's journey doesn't necessarily end. Zoroastrianism entertains the idea of spiritual evolution, possibly leading to rebirth or final purification, so there's something to look forward to. Tenrikyo. You might want to sit tight for this one. It's a little different from what you've seen so far. The Tenrikyo belief system takes a more transactional approach to life and death, one that might just make you rethink what it means to live. According to Tenrikyo, your body is a gift, something God, the parent, has lent you. You're allowed to use it, but when you die, you're simply returning the rental back to its rightful owner. To put it simply, you live in this world by the grace of God's providence, borrowing your body for the journey. When your time's up and you give back what you borrowed, you're not dead. You've just passed away for rebirth. Yeah, in this afterlife theory, death is like casting off a worn-out jacket. You return to worn-out body and prepare to be reborn into a new one. But don't get too excited, rebirth isn't a clean slate. According to the Tenrikyo belief system, God the parent designed humans to live for exactly 115 years. Not 120, not 85, exactly 115. If you clock out early, it's not because you ran out of luck, it's because your mind is dusty. Tenrikyo believes that dust in your mind, which refers to things like greed, arrogance, or selfishness, shortens your life. Keep things clean and you might just hit that 115-year target. If you don't, you could be heading to an early grave, literally. Tenrikyo doesn't buy into the concept of heaven or hell. In their view, the whole world is already God's bosom, like the world you're sitting in right now. Their ultimate goal is to turn this earthly existence into the joyous life, a kind of paradise on earth where everyone gets along. Spoiler alert, we're not quite there yet. When you pass away for rebirth, your soul returns to God's embrace, waiting to hop into its next body. But don't think you're getting a get-out-of-jail-free card. Tenrikyo teaches that your soul carries baggage. Your past actions, whether good or bad, stick with you. And sooner or later, you'll reap what you've sown, either in this life or the next. But that's not all. In this belief system, life's challenges, like illnesses, hardships, and tragedies, aren't seen as random misfortunes. Instead, they're considered divine guidance, signs from God meant to lead you towards spiritual growth and self-reflection. The goal is spiritual maturity, aligning your thoughts, actions, and desires with God's will, and living a life of sincerity. Nail it, and you'll be one step closer to the joyous life. If you mess up, you'll keep cycling through birth, death, and rebirth, stuck in a loop like a bad movie you can't turn off. But hey, at least you get a do-over, right? Even though Tenrikyo's afterlife doesn't involve fiery pits and pearly gates, its idea of borrowed bodies, cosmic accountability, and endless do-overs is definitely something to think about. Sumerian Beliefs. Picture this. You're descending into a dark, dusty realm where the air is thick, the bread is stale, and the water tastes like salt and regret. Welcome to Urkala, the shadowy underworld ruled by Ereshkigal, the Sumerian goddess of death, who is said to manage the dead with all the warmth of a tax collector. The first thing you should know is that the Sumerians didn't sugarcoat the afterlife. Their underworld, Kur, was as bleak as it gets. Dark, dusty, and downright depressing. The dead got to rock itchy feather cloaks that barely kept out the cold, while choking down stale bread and sipping on salty, gross water. Oh, and by the way, this wasn't punishment for bad behavior. It was just the standard deal for existing. Your experience in the underworld didn't depend on how good or bad you were in life. Instead, it came down to how fancy your burial was. The more bling in your grave, the better your setup in the afterlife. If you were broke, you might be dining off crumb-covered bricks or something just as bad. As I said, the Sumerians didn't romanticize death, but they did take it seriously. Burial practices were practical, yet deeply rooted in tradition. Most people were buried in family tombs, something right under the floor of their own homes. The dead were curled into a fetal position and tucked into jars, cloth, or sarcophagi, depending on how much cash their family had to spare. The wealthy had a slightly better deal, but not by much. They were buried with grave goods like jewelry, tools, and even some over-the-top items like golden headdresses or musical instruments, because nothing says luxury like playing the harp in the great big underworld. In rare cases, like the burial of Sumerian Queen Puabi, servants and slaves were sacrificed so they could accompany their masters to the underworld. Not even death could get the poor guys off the hook. Before entering Urkala, the dead would face judgment. Ereshkigal and her 7 judges would decide their fate. But don't expect a good versus evil weighing of souls here. The Sumerian afterlife didn't do rewards or punishments. Instead, your status in the underworld would simply reflect your status in life. Wealthy souls got thrones or palaces, while the poor were stuck in endless suffering. To make matters worse, your comfort in the afterlife depended on your living family's offerings and sacrifices. If your family slacked off, you were doomed to eat crumbs, or worse, fade into eternal obscurity. That's all the disturbing afterlife beliefs we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.